Prepare ye the way of the Lord, the prophet invited. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Last Sunday, that prophet, John the Baptist, called us to do some growing. He told us in no uncertain terms that we got some growing to do. To prepare the way of the Lord means to clear out the obstacles around us and inside of us that keep us from growing, that are blocking our way to life and to love. And so that our work these Advent days is, first of all, to even want to grow. That might be even the biggest step, to want to grow. And then be aware, constantly, vigilant, aware, and identifying those obstacles in the way, and then dismantle them. Know where the landmines are between us and life and us and love, and dismantle them, whatever it takes to do that. All because there is so much joy as yet to be had that has so far eluded us. But if there is all that joy at the end of the road, and as I trust is true, we've all tasted something of that joy that comes from growing, from preparing the way, perhaps even along the way as we walk, then why do you think so few, it seems, choose to grow? Why do so few seem to be willing to do that work to grow and maybe not even let themselves want to grow? Since that homily last Sunday, I've been in so many conversations about growing with you guys. Conversations not of my initiative. And what keeps coming up in these conversations is that this growth stuff is really terribly scary, actually. That if I really let myself grow, I won't be the same tomorrow as I was today. And everything will be different. And I just might end up in a place I don't want to be, risking more than I know how. And God only knows what it would cost me if I let myself grow. One student put it this way, and it's the question I passed on to you this morning as the gospel question. If I grow, if I really let myself fall in love with God, which I'm afraid, terribly afraid is happening, do I have to become a priest? I've never felt some of the feelings I feel in this newfound faith. I find myself tearing up over this experience of faith that I've never really ever had before in my whole life. And I'm frankly scared to death that being a priest is what God's going to call me to do, what God's going to ask of me. And I've always wanted to just be a dad. I want to have a family. It's been my passion, but now there's this. I suspect many of us have had feelings of wonder whether or not, if we really fall in love with God, we might be called to religious life, full-time dedicated in one way or another. And at first, like many calls that demand a lot, it can be a dreadful feeling, really. The seeming sacrifice looms so large. And then I see what can happen, and I see how much it does really cost to grow. A lot, actually. So many of our students over these years have just started burning with something they never burned with before while they're in this community and part of college life. New passions igniting, new capacities for connecting and communication, truly. And so the old patterns really aren't carrying them anymore, the patterns they grew up with. And then it comes to be Christmas break, And they're all excited to go home and get a break from the exams and the relentless pressures of this university. And they get home, and it's not what they had hoped, It's actually maybe a little bit lonely. It's like they're not all the way fitting, and they try to start conversations about things that have begun to matter to them, and there's no room really at the kitchen table for those conversations. The truth is, if one person grows in a system like a family system, the whole family either has to stretch to embrace that and grow themselves, or the system will crack. You probably know that. And so there's even a resistance in these systems that get sometimes in these ruts of communication and stuff. It could be something as simple as wanting to give their dad a hug, to giving their dad a kiss, to saying thank you in a tender words without getting sort of teased about it or made fun of about it. Or some sort of opening at the dinner table to talk about God or church or the struggles of faith or love. And there's just not a place at the table for that level of vulnerability. And it becomes this sort of loneliness at home. It's like they just don't fit there anymore. And all of a sudden they just want to come back, where maybe it's a little safer. Growth is demanding, and it takes a lot. And it takes a lot of all the people who love us if we are the one that happens to be growing. And then my fear clicks in. Gosh, they're growing so fast. I sense the growth, and I can just tell they're wanting to curb it now. They're wanting to curb it. It's becoming too much too fast. They want to stifle this too much. They want to tame it almost too quickly and then channel it, curb it, because they don't want to upset the apple cart of their marriage, of their family life, of their old friendships. All because it's just too uncomfortable, to keep doing this. I know it a little bit in just my everyday life when I open myself, for example, to new learning, new people who think differently than I do and live differently than I live. And when I read a book, for example, by an atheist who's trying to convince me there's no God, there's always this teeny little question in me as I pick up that book that says, is this the one that's going to do me in? I know priests who've lost their faith, and while my faith feels sure, none of us really knows for sure about this stuff. Might this be the book? I learned to not read these books before I go to sleep at night anymore. I just think growth has at its root this sort of insecurity about how we will be. Is that unknown stuff that makes growth so frightening? Again, I go back to an analogy you've heard me use before, but it works for me because I'm scared of heights, at least the ones where you just hang over nothing. The analogy of the trapeze artist. If that artist is ever to become great, they just can't keep swinging from the same bar, the same trapeze. At some point, if they're going to be a great artist of the trapeze, they have to let go. They have to let go of that safety place. They have to let go of this familiar thing. They have to let go, and they have to reach across nothingness before they can grab onto the next one in the hope that it's going to be there when their hands get there. And there they are, suspended over everything, unprotected, no assurance of landing well. Hanging there, suspended on only nothingness between what was and what is coming. She or he has to reach for that trapeze. That's what growing feels like to me. That's what it feels like to say yes to this emerging, unknown future. Every marriage goes through it, every friendship, every community. This weekend, then, the prophet John is in our faces once again for our sake. This time he's reminding us that this is the winnowing of growth, the winnowing that has to separate out the wheat from the chaff and burn the chaff in unquenchable fire. This winnowing has to be done if we're going to go for it, if we're going to grow, if we're going to become everything we can be in life and love. We got some winnowing to do then. And it is this winnowing that makes growth so dreadful. And now it becomes clear. In the end, there's only one thing. There is only one chaff. There's only one thing that keeps you and me from becoming all that we can be. There's only one thing that keeps us from this elusive joy this Sunday celebrates and holds out in front of us. This joy that the prophet Zephaniah is reflecting on when he says clearly that joy is something God takes in us. Here's how he said it, Zephaniah, the prophet. God takes joy in you growing. You are God's joy all the time, but especially when you're growing. Not only are you the source of God's joy, you're the source of God's delight. The Lord your God is in your midst. God is watching you. That's Savior. And God rejoices over you with gladness and keeps renewing you in his love so that he can sing joyfully because of you. Because this time, once again, you're stepping out and you're growing. Sing joyfully because of you, growing, as one sings at festivals. There's only one thing that keeps God from that joy and therefore us from that joy. Fear. Fear. Fear is the only thing that will keep you from growing, from letting it rip, from this emergence into life of this dormant best self in me. The winnowing of fear in our lives has got to come to pass. Fear is the chaff that must be separated out from the wheat. Fear is the chaff that must be burned away if we are going to live out loud and love like a wild man, like a wild woman. It is fear that asks the question and causes us to pull back and not be true to ourselves. Fear is everywhere in us like a cancer that gradually takes our life and takes our loves. And it's fear that asks that question. Really, as normal as it is, it's fear that asks the question, if I really let myself go into God and fall in love with God, do I have to be a priest? Our fears have got to go. And no matter what that young man decides to do with his life, it doesn't mean he has to. As you all know, God will not ask anything of us that at least is not somewhere inside of us already, waiting to be discovered. But that fear cannot be the reason he says no. Fear's got to go. Jesus said it over 100 times. Do not be afraid. What if you were starting to feel a stirring in the classroom some afternoon that perhaps the field you chose to study in is the wrong field? What if all your life you were aiming towards being a doctor and now that's not quite working for you? What if you started getting an inkling that maybe your parents were not all that great and all that perfect in some significant way that has perhaps left you somewhat damaged? What if that girl or guy you're almost committed to or even engaged to is not the one? What if you're smack dab in the middle of the seminary and excited about getting ordained and everybody's excited for you getting ordained and then all of a sudden you fall in love? What if you begin to question your sexual orientation and there's nothing that would torment you more because of your career and your parents and your dreams for a family that you would find out that perhaps maybe you're gay? What if? What if? What if? What if? It's all fear. What ifs are always the questions growth opens up for us. And the answer always comes back. Just don't be afraid. Please. I am so grateful because of the power of growth. I am so grateful for the chance to be a priest. I can't imagine a vocation for myself that would have made growth more possible for me constantly, unrelentingly possible. It's just always so unsettling of a life, at least for me. And I'm so grateful for the college students in our midst who are growing, all the time growing, with knowledge and experience, everything opening up for them all the time, living examples to me of what this means to grow and to not stop growing. The energy's electric. And I'm so grateful to you, for all of you, for continuing to choose to grow. You know, you're here because you want to grow. You've come the extra mile this morning to be here. You passed 20 churches on your way here. And you came here because you tell me again and again, this is where I'm growing right now. This is where I'm challenged. This is what I want. And so it's worth it for me. And I think that's why sometimes when priests come to visit and lead you guys when I'm out of town, they just keep commenting. It's like, I feel when I'm here like it's Thanksgiving in a parish where everybody wants to be there. And so everybody sings and everybody responds and everybody's participating, and I just don't see that at home because you want to grow. You've come the extra mile literally because you want to get closer to God and you want this spiritual life thing to work for you. How can I thank you enough for that? Do you know what it's like for me as your priest to be a part of that energy in you to grow closer to God? The answer always comes back, don't be afraid. All that fear is just chaff, needing to be separated out, thrown into the fire. So my friends, let's do the winnowing now of fear. The joy of being free to live and free to love can be ours.